And so it's much more speculative, and it is also based on the idea that everything's normal, the world works the way we expect it to work, except for one thing, and in this case, it's doorways that allow refugees to move from one part of the world to the other. And so the main characters are, the country is never really specified. I think the implication is it's Iraq, it's Iran, it's Syria, something like that. And so this young couple is trying to figure out what to do with their lives, and they, as their society becomes more oppressive, and blah, 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 and there are rumors of doorways that if you pay people money who know about them, they'll help you get out of the country, in much the same way that coyotes get
I was trying to think of the word coyotes, yes.
Across the border, you know, that whole kind of thing. And it's risky because it can be corrupt and all that kind of thing. And again, it's a very believable book until you get to the point where you realize that they're real. The mythical doorways actually are true.
Yeah.
And then it kind of devolves more into again, it's not really science fiction or fantasy, but it's just speculative enough that he creates a world that is based on the idea that people can, you know, go through that door over there and end up in London.
Right.
Or Southern California, or Namibia, or India. And so there's all of a sudden there's free-flowing refugees, and it creates a completely different world. So I found it interesting because the two books kind of, they approach similar issues in very different ways, but with that same core. Like they're each taking one aspect of the world and blowing it out of the water and seeing what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Casting, that's what good speculative fiction will do that, because it's asking you what if.
What if? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What if this was true or whatever, based on this technology, this is what will happen. I'm just curious too, do you choose where you go, or do you not know where you're going to go?
You don't know where you're going to go.
Okay, so these are doors that you can say, I'm going to go through that door and take my chances.
Yep.
That's sort of like makes it into a whole different sort of exciting situation.
The first time when they leave their original country, they end up on a Greek island, which, because it's small, and actually this is very much like what's going on in the world today, it's a Greek island that is normally a tourist destination, but they have to set up camps because there's all these refugees who are coming in from doorways and ending up on this little island, and then they have to figure out how to move them on. And then eventually, I think because he's a British author, they end up in London. And I think that's probably just because the author is most familiar with that and wants to deal with it. So much of the book takes place in London, which
is also timely because of Brexit and all the other things that have been happening. So.
And they have an influx of refugees from different parts of the world gradually working their way through the EU, trying to find the safest or most economically viable place. And so this just kind of, I thought it was an excellent choice, and I think it did make the cut for the second, for the short list. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think I saw both Hamid and Whitehead on that list. So, and the George Sanders you've got there too, or Saunders.
Yes, the Saunders is another one that was on the bestseller list for much of the summer, and loved it. It's going to be made into a film.
Oh, they are?
I will be dying to have either of you read it?
I read it.
No, she read it, and I'm going to listen to it.
You were going to listen to it, right?
I'm going to listen to it. I just haven't gotten there yet.
It's not for everyone. I loved it. A lot of the people I know who read it loved it. It's about, the bardo is actually now I'm forgetting.
It's sort of like...
I forget from which religious tradition.
I think
it's like a
Buddhism,
limbo state. Is it Buddhist?
Or Hindu? I think it might be Hindu.
Anyway, the bardo refers to a sort of limbo-like place between life and death in some important religious tradition that escapes me. And it's a historical novel about Abraham Lincoln's older son who dies of an illness when he's very young. I think it's pneumonia or some kind of infectious disease that he gets. And so the book focuses on the cemetery where the boy is temporarily there before he moves on, and Lincoln goes there to grieve his son. But there's this whole cast of characters, many of whom are real. It's lots of very short snippets, which makes me wonder how they're going to handle an audiobook, because from what I heard, the audiobook actually has like 100 different voices.
Distinct voice, an actor for every voice. I don't even think anyone's doing something twice.
I don't know if
it's like one line,
if people
right?
can see this on the screen, but yeah, I mean, it's almost like reading a play where characters have literally one line or a paragraph after another. So it's pretty experimental. I loved it. I don't think everyone will,
right?
Because it's a little different, but it's fascinating. And I guess they are going to be making a film, and it's being produced by guess who? Megan Mullally.
Really? I did not know that.
Of all people, is one of the people who's behind.
Well, I think she is one of the voices on the audio.
Yeah.
So maybe that's one of the things that happened. She was just like, I can't.
So
this is
maybe
amazing.
she was struck by it.
I thought I might have trouble with the construction to the structure, but I didn't.
It takes a little. You have to get into the rhythm of it. But
because he's also quoting from actual books.
Yeah.
It's not just the other voices.
Right.
There's fictional characters interspersed with snippets of advertisements or news articles that are actually real from the time period.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
He's so experimental a writer anyway. I mean, his short stories are they're little universes all in their own. It's amazing how little prose he needs to write for you to get where he's going. It's just astonishing.
And I think
talented.
for people who might be a little intimidated by it being experimental, it's still a fast read because it's so quick.
Sure.
It's very, very quick. And I think it's worth stretching yourself a little bit to give it a try. I'm dying to see what they do with the film.
Absolutely. No, I can see why you would be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you say page turner. I think you guys both know that when I went away on vacation this summer, I brought my bag of assassins and spies because I, for some reason, need to have a hero in my life right now. And I picked this up by William Christie. It's called A Single Spy, and it was superb. First-person point of view, a terribly unreliable narrator, but in a wonderfully sardonic and witty way. And his name is Alexei, and he grows up in the late 20s and early 30s in Russia. And he is basically a desert rat. And he's a thief, and he's a guide. He'll do anything he can to make his living. Well, to make a long story a little shorter, he ends up being recruited by the Russians in the 30s to become a spy.
Just the kind of guy you love. Right?
You know it. and they go into his elaborate training. It's very interesting. It's a little strange at times, but the Russians were very single-minded when it came to training their spies. There was always they had certain ways of communicating to each other, and they had to learn all sorts of things you would never guess.
So wait, is this present day though?
No, this is the 30s going into the 40s.
Okay.
So they sent him to Germany, and he's accepted as someone's long-lost cousin, and he becomes a spy in Germany. However, it gets very complicated, and I wouldn't want to give this away because you really do want to go on the journey yourself. But it ends up that he now is also privy to all sorts of information that he has to decide what to do with, because the Russians who have trained him don't believe what he's telling them. And he's trying to give them real information that's going to save lives and win the war. And they're like going, yeah, I don't think that's going to, no, that's not what we believe could possibly happen. And Stalin's very rigid about his ideas of what's going to happen. So Papa Joe does not like to hear that he was wrong. So they ignore a lot of this. It's fascinating, though.
Vaguely familiar.
I wonder what you might mean by that. So anyway, it's really well done, very well paced. It's humorous. He's snarky, and he's always going, something terrible will happen to him, and he'll go, well, of course. Of course, this means I'm going to have to do such and such and deal with so and so, and he's just got a wonderful voice. I think that what Christie does a really good job of is taking the historical accuracy of the time period, and it's revolving around a character who could or could not exist. Because the whole thing about this is that a single spy could make all the difference in something as big as World War II, and you believe it. And even if there wasn't just a single spy, you realize that a lot of the things they're talking about came from the espionage of a variety of different factions. And the ending is one of those great twisty-turny things. It leaves it that we could have a sequel, but you don't need it. I want it, but I love Alexei. And it was just a really fun book. I called it a historic entertainment because there was so much about this that just moved very quickly. And a lot of times the historical spy novels have a little bit more, I don't know, you have to have a bit more patience with them.
So would this make your adrenaline list?
Yes, it would
Yeah.
make my adrenaline list without a doubt. And in fact, Jackie, our assistant director who likes to read this stuff, I gave it to her and I said, you need to read this.
Yeah.
And she really enjoyed it.
Good.
And we both are fans of, the Gabriel Allon series by Daniel Silva.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
I think anybody who read any of the early Ken Follett's, especially the
Eye of the Needle.
Eye of the Needle.
Eye of the Needle, and also his later series that takes place around the Berlin Wall, Berlin Game, and that trilogy would love this because it's just there's real truth in it. At the same time, it's being driven by the character, and there's some things on it that will break your heart, and there's some stuff there that you just really don't want to have to read because you don't want it to think that it exists or it existed.
What
But
was the one I'm thinking of? The Lives of Others?
Lives of Others, that sounds
Is
familiar.
that?
But
It was a Mass Book Award thing, but it was kind of that same, like, older man who used to be a spy and, like,
Oh, yes.
everything comes back
Yep.
to haunt him kind of stuff.
Yep. So that was one of my really wonderful surprises. And just anecdotally, William Christie is someone who's written a lot of thrillers, and they usually have something to do with the U.S. government. And he does it's a little bit of a Tom Clancy-ish or a Vince Flynn take
Yeah.
on things. And I knew him years ago when I lived in Franklin. And his very first book that came out was done for the Franklin Public Library,
that's
which I was
so
a friend
cool.
at the time. And I got to meet him, and he was a really interesting man. He does his research, and you can tell from this that he continues to do that.
I could read a nonfiction, but you're going to have to help me with the title.
Uh-oh.
It's about the man who was a thief, and I think he was a double agent, the British and the Russians.
Oh, I know who you. Yes. Oh, was it Ben McIntyre wrote it? I don't. Anyway, well, we'll have to.
Put that in the credits.
I'll put it in the credits
The
somewhere. Yeah.
Operator? No.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah, but
figure
it's
it
got
out.
something like that.
It was
Yeah.
blue.
It was blue. Everything was blue. Everything was blue, and so it seems.
The author's name began with an R. Or a T.
Or T. One of those. What are you
Something
going to
like
do?
that.
So, I mean, that as I said, I don't really like the historical spy novels the way I used to. I like the more contemporary stuff, which you'd think that I'd want to get away from that because too many of those plots are But give me a good character anytime. So the other book I wanted to briefly mention is, and I really encourage both of you to read this, is The Magpie Murders.
Oh, you mentioned that to me last
I
week.
did by Anthony Horowitz.
Oh, okay.
And it's just terrific. It's one of those books where it begins with an editor telling you that she's going to ruin your life because she's going to make you read this book. She reads a book within the book, and you get to a point where you don't have an ending, and she has to figure out what that is. It is superb. Especially if you like the metafiction stuff.
I love stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
You know, you are, and there's some wonderful quotes about mysteries. I mean, like I actually copied a lot of it because I was like, oh, this is just exactly how a detective would do his work. You know, he's making some wonderful points through her. And what I think he's doing a good job is he nails the female very well. But what I thought you'd like especially about it, Jeff, is that a little bit of it takes place around a Greek guy.
Ah, there you go.
And there's
I'm
a lot
sold.
of Greek food eaten.
If this, you had me at Greek food, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, we're gonna wrap this up today.
Okay.
And I just want to mention to everyone to come into the Beebe Library and have a conversation with us about books. We love to do that.
As you can see, it's hard to shut us up about books,
That's true.
actually.
That's true.